Hey y'all, thanks for joining me with the second episode of Learning with Lear. Last week I talked about how framing anti-racism through a privileged frame, what I call privileged discourse, is actually problematic. I actually made the argument that it's the anti-racism that whiteness and white supremacy tolerates. If you would like to catch that discussion, go ahead. The link is in the description. Today, I'm going to talk about what I believe is a more effective frame, what I call interest discourse. But before I jump into that, I want to point out an example of the failure of privileged discourse. Last week, Johns Hopkins released a list of privileged identities. On that list were white and Christian. The good folks over at Fox News and other folks on the political right got super upset. They got freaked out. And they spent two whole segments talking about this. Okay. That's to be expected. That was not even the part that frustrated me the most about what happened. The most frustrating part was how folks on the left responded. They responded by proving privilege exists. This back and forth is exhausting. And more than that, unhelpful. That energy should be better spent talking about the root causes of that privilege and the systems that perpetuate it. Okay? This back and forth puts us in a position where on the right, that energy is spent using their own personal lives and anecdotes from, other identities other than the ones that are on that list or their own personal hardships to prove that privilege doesn't exist. Folks on the left are throwing data and stats and proving the obvious that privilege does exist. But it gives cover, right? That means Nikki Haley can get on TV and say that we've never been a racist country when literally we enslaved other human beings. That was legal in our systems. When legally codified in law, black folks and other folks of color were second-class citizens, did not enjoy the rights of citizenship. It is just fundamentally untrue to claim that we are not a racist country or have never been a racist country. All right? But that is what privileged discourse perpetuates. Okay? That is how whiteness operates. The idea that being white is better or privileged is put up, and then folks debate about that. Is that true or is that not? Look at how hard my life has been. How can I be privileged? And then it just perpetuates. Wins become proving or accepting privilege exists, or just blatantly not accepting it. None of that actually addresses the problem, white supremacy and whiteness. None of that moves us closer to racial justice. And more than that, it positions whiteness as better, as privileged. And it ignores, and this is the important part, it ignores that the promises of whiteness are shallow, empty, and in the end, poisonous to us, to white folks. Okay, so that brings me to the topic of this video: how we move past privilege and into interest discourse. Okay, the idea of interest in anti-racism is actually not new. Dr. Derek Bell touches on it in his theory of interest convergence. I'm going to simplify. So for those folks that are study Dr. Bell and understand what I'm talking about, please understand this is a simplified version. Holla at me, email me, follow me on social media if you want to have a more in-depth conversation. But in Dr. Bell's theory, he makes the argument that progress on racial justice will only happen when the interests of white people converges with the interests of racial justice, with black folks, with other folks of color. Okay. The issue here is that it assumes white people's interests will always align with those of whiteness. Now that's a solid observation, right? This is not. I'm not saying that this is not based in fact. Since its inception, the majority of white folks have aligned their interests with that of whiteness. That was the whole purpose of whiteness. Okay. But I wanted to ask the question, and I think it's time for us to ask the question: what if white people's interests didn't align with that of whiteness? What if we, white people, understood our self-interest differently? What if we understood that whiteness and white supremacy costs us? What if we felt that disconnection from humanity? What if we didn't turn our heads from the gory reality of whiteness, from the brutality of its violence? This is what self-interest does. It remembers that whiteness costs us. It is a serious accounting of what Baldwin called the price of the ticket. With this frame, white folks are able to engage authentically in the work of racial justice because we're not doing it for other people. We're not seeing an other and saying, oh, we need to help them. We're not motivated by guilt. As a matter of fact, interest discourse helps us overcome some of the common pitfalls of privileged discourse, and the way that racial justice is framed. Things like white guilt, things like saviorism, white ignorance, and white solidarity, they are all things that privileged discourse perpetuates, gives fuel to, and is ill equipped to address. But interest discourse allows us to interrupt because we're not doing things for other people. We're understanding that we have stake in this, that our lives are better, and we should still do the right thing. We can see oppression and violence and the worst of white supremacy, and see that it's meted out on communities of color, and we should feel some way about that. But that's not our motivation. We're not, neutral participants who are just going after this abstract common good. We understand that our souls are actually on the line. That every time we don't say something, we are moving farther from humanity. We are moving farther into the disconnect. Okay, and then that disconnect hurts us. That is what will lead us towards racial justice. Okay, and when we use the frame of interest discourse, we remember that we are human, that we are a part of the human family. Our need for connection, our need to be connected to not only each other, but to creation and to the creator becomes paramount. And because of this, we name the history of racial violence and whiteness. Because you can't fix something, you can't heal from something if you don't name it. And we advocate for real measures of repair. Not because we're doing things for other people, but because we realize how that disconnection and how that harm is still living out today, still impacting us today, and we want to heal so that we can become more human, so that we can be connected to the human family. From that place, we can take real steps towards racial reconciliation. Okay? The need for this has never been more obvious. On Monday, Donald Trump, an open white supremacist with explicit authoritarian positions, set a record for support in Iowa. Okay? White people came out in droves to support this man. That is how ingrained whiteness is in our society. White people will chase what Dr. Du Bois called the psychological wages of whiteness rather than accept that whiteness is killing us. And it is killing us. I want to be clear. Jonathan Metzl makes this very, very clear in Dying of Whiteness. So we have to address, why are those arguments, why is this reality not working for folks? Okay? And we do that through self-interest. Talking about privilege is not equipped to handle that. Privilege discourse is not equipped to handle that reality. It infirms it. Interest discourse is the only way we adequately address what Trump and others are capitalizing on, whiteness. Okay? Thanks for joining me this week. Next week, we're going to talk about what reconciliation might look like. I'm also going to be posting some other videos. And so subscribe and stay connected. I hope you're doing well. Peace. Again, hit that follow, hit that subscribe button. Really appreciate it. Hope you're doing well, good folks.